The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. Fundamental. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday evening. Hope everybody's having a great week. And yeah, today's our monthly Q&A with those who contribute $25 or more on a monthly basis to Yaron Brook Show. And we've got a number of people lined up. We will also be taking Super Chat. So get ready with your questions. So today's all Q&A. Super Chat will be ranked based on how many dollars you put into the Super Chat questions. So just something quick, election related. What the hell? Last show I did about kind of the potential chaos on election night and what might happen and contested election and all that. If you think what I said was scary, then look at the Atlantic magazine's cover story today, where they have a whole list of scenarios around what might happen if Donald Trump does not concede. They place all of the responsibility, of course, all of the responsibility on Trump. They ignore kind of the threat from the left, but the threats exist there from both sides, and it's pretty scary. Tom, Jonathan, you should have received the link by email. I'll talk to Angela about why you do not have it. I am not sure, but you should have received it. Let's see if I can dig out a link here. This is all different than what I remember it. Yeah, here we go. Can do that. Yeah, but if I put it up, then it opens up to everybody, so I can't actually put it up on the chat. So, sorry guys. Check your junk folder. Maybe it went to the junk, but you should have received an invite either through Patreon or through email. There, Jonathan has found his. Tom, maybe you can find yours. All right, let us get started with the Q&A. So we'll just go through the various people who've called in. They'll ask the questions. We'll do a round. We'll take the Super Chat. We'll do another round. We do this every month. You guys have it down already by now. All right, let's start with Daniel.
Sure. First of all, I have to say the election is very uninteresting to me. It seems to be Dumb and Dumber. I mean, I cannot get excited. But what does interest me is, what do you think the factors are that could lead this to devolve into something approaching a revolution? Some armed conflict, some really, really horrible. What's going to decide if that's the way it ends up going? Because as you said, there's a lot of bad things out there.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what will decide that are the players, and it's Trump. Trump has the capacity to turn this into a complete and utter disaster and a catastrophe if he doesn't concede, even if he's lost clearly, or if he drags us out for months with legal challenges. And of course, the left can do the same. Biden can do the same. So unless there's an overwhelming victory, unless there's a landslide, both parties have the option to drag it out. And unfortunately, it turns out that a lot of the laws governing our elections and the Electoral College and a lot of the other things are ambiguous. And the Supreme Court's going to have a tough time figuring out what rules. Every state has its own rules. The rules related to mail-in ballots, the rules related to what happens if they come in late, the rules related to all these things are ambiguous, and that's why it's going to be hard to make a decision. But then the players have to decide how far they're willing to take this. And that's the two main players. And then there's, of course, who knows what's going on in the background. If the Antifa like people? Are they organizing to really turn this into riots and demonstrations? And are they armed? And to what extent are they armed? And the same is true on the right. Are all these militias that supposedly have been formed over the last 4 years? Is this the election that they're going to come out with their AR-15s and walk the streets and intimidate people? I think it's going to be people making those kind of decisions. And I hope it doesn't come to this, but it could come to the decisions of the generals about whether to obey whoever, the Supreme Court, to obey Trump, to obey the voters, whether the military. And I'm sure, I mean, it would be irresponsible of them not to having these discussions, but I'm sure the Joint Chiefs of Staffs are probably having discussions about that right now. What happens if they were asked to go into the streets to quell so-called insurrection based on the Insurrection Act, if they think that's being used as a tactic post-election? If Trump is clearly lost, or a lot of people think he's clearly lost, and he won't vacate the White House, are there institutions that would step in? Would the military step in? So I think it's issues like that. It's kind of unbelievable to me, and really unbelievable to me, that we're even having this discussion. I mean, this is the United States of America. You know, we're talking about it like it's a banana republic. And yet it looks like both on the left and on the right, they're making plans. They're making concrete plans around different scenarios that make this possible. Supposedly, this is being discussed among advisors to Trump. It's being discussed in state houses where they expect close elections. What are they going to do? And most of the states in which they expect close elections, Republicans control both the houses and senates in those states. So Trump has a leg up. So I don't know. I mean, it scares me. I can't really believe it's going to happen. There's something in me that thinks, nah, this is America. And you know, these are adults and they'll resolve these things and nobody's that bad. But in this election year, with the rhetoric and everything that's going on, I think anything is possible.
Thank you.
And I agree with you about how boring the election is. I mean, it's dumb and dumber and bad and badder. And there's nothing good that can come out of this election. Whoever wins, it's bad. Whoever wins, you can't imagine. Those people are presidents of the United States. But that's the tragedy, that's where we are. Okay, Roy.
Yeah, howdy. Leaving aside the uncertainties, the scary uncertainties with this specific election, more generally, it's always struck me as really peculiar, in fact, nuts, that there be a 2.5-month gap between the time a new president has been elected and the time he takes office. Contrast this with the UK, where when a new prime minister is elected, the next day, the current prime minister moves out of 10 Downing Street and the new one moves in and starts the new government. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. But I think a couple of things. One is just my experience with and I'm not sure how it works in the UK exactly, but with the Israeli government, it's often the case that weeks, certainly months can pass without a government being formed, with an interim government that is really the previous government staying in power because of coalition talks. So often there is no coalition, and you saw this in the Israeli election, the 3 Israeli elections recently where there was no government formed. So the time between election and actually a government stepping into the equivalent of 10 Downing Street can take weeks, if not a couple of months. The second thing is there is something about the government in the UK, about the bureaucracy in the UK. Reminds me, if you've ever seen Yes Minister, the bureaucracy in the UK runs the country. And sometimes it's conservatives and sometimes it's Labour, but basically it's the bureaucrats running things. So it doesn't really matter to the bureaucrats who's in 10 Downing Street. They continue to do the things that they continue to do. So it seems to me like there's a sense in which the UK bureaucracy is all powerful and the American is not. So it takes a while for the new administration to come in, to make appointments, to get rid of the people that belong to the old administration, replace them with new people. I don't have a sense that that happens when there's a change of government in Israel or there's a change of government in the UK. There's just less to do in the transition because the bureaucrats are there for life and they know their job and they're not going to change. They're not political appointees. The US system has many, many more political appointments for whatever reason. And I'm not sure exactly why, but I think that's true. Anyway,
Well,
that's my speculation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's here, certainly our system is different in that the president, if there's a new president, he doesn't have to form any kind of coalition.
That's right.
He might have to do some negotiating behind the scenes, but he can move into the White House. I think to do it the next day is crazy. I mean, for Christ's sake, give him a chance to do his laundry before he moves out, you know, that sort of thing. So I say like a couple of weeks. But
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, the 2.5 months are probably from the era we had to ride on a horse in from Illinois to come and occupy the White House, and it took him a week to, you know, it took him weeks just to get there.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. Yeah.
you know, I don't know, but it does seem like in the U.S. a big deal is made of the transition. There's a whole, you know, there are meetings and there's groups and there's a big deal is made of this, and I'm not sure why that's necessary, but it seems to happen every single time. Thanks,
Okay,
boy.
thanks.
All right, 917 ends with 540. All right, guys, that's the number that dialed me. So 917. Don't.
You're on?
Yes. Yes.
Hi,
Hey.
it's Andrew.
Hey, Andrew. I should
How
know
are
you
you?
by heart by now.
I want to be one of the name people, but I don't know how to do it. I always record my name, but somehow it's a number.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the allegation that objectivists are in a cult. It came up again this week. It's obviously been around as long as Ayn Rand, and she was accused of it many times, and it's just that accusation is common against objectivists.
Yep.
And this last week, Matt Ridley, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm going to have to
Group.
sit down with Matt Ridley and talk to him about that. That's ridiculous. Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you your perspective on it, because the way I see it is this, that there's 3 different ways it's made. One is dishonest, because I think that Ayn Rand's and objectivism's intellectual consistency haunts people who, you know, need to find a way out of taking the philosophy seriously. And so they lodge an unfair accusation. And I just see that as dishonest. Secondly, the second way I would say it's made is dishonest. I would say there's 2 categories of dishonesty. One is maliciously and one is non-maliciously. Like what Matt Ridley did, I didn't see as malicious, but I do think it's dishonest personally, because I think he should know better. Yeah, I mean, through his exposure to you and just his general knowledge.
Yep, absolutely.
It's unfair. But then there's some people who make it very maliciously, obviously, and they're being dishonest. And then I think that somebody could make the allegation honestly just because they see that you know, the philosophy is different and it's small and it's fervent and it has somebody at the head of the, you know, philosophy who we all revere tremendously. And these are all characteristics that a person could probably honestly confuse with kind of a cultish mentality. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the proper response and way to counter when that allegation comes up, both in kind of a dishonest and an honest context? Like how would you respond, and how would your response change?
Well, I mean, I think your differentiation is right. And I think that part of the issue is people and this leads them to this dishonesty, which is the more the non-malicious one, the more. And they're not used to people holding principles and being assertive about the principles and sticking to those principles consistently. And they associate that with either religion or a cult. And if they can't pin it on religion, then they pin it on they pin it on a cult. And I mean, my guess is that's what Matt Ridley thinks of it, although I don't think Matt actually thought of it. Otherwise, I'm not sure he would have said it. But I think the way to combat it is to ask them what they think a cult is. And a cult is, they would all say, mindless followers of dogma by a particular. And I think inherent in objectivism is the answer to that. It's if it's mindless, it's not part of objectivism. If it's following the group and following commands of a leader, following the commands of the collective, then it's not objectivism. The anti-cult is built into objectivism. Now, people might treat objectivism as a cult, and I certainly know people who call themselves objectivists who behave like cult members. But I think it's important to note that as a philosophy and its principles, while it holds certain things as true, the whole methodology of it is anti-cult. The whole methodology of it is it's about inquiry into what is true and what is not about is what did Ayn Rand say and what she did not. So yeah, I mean, there's no basis for it. It's complete nonsense. The only basis for it is that some people that call themselves objectivists behave as if it's a cult, and that's tragic.
Can you expand on that a little, in the sense that there might be some particularly younger objectivists who don't know they're behaving or giving off a certain vibe of, being. I mean, so how does somebody not give off that vibe?
The vibe of a cult is unthinking. It's dogma. It's quotations. It's constantly quoting rather than using your own language. It's as soon as somebody disagrees with you, shutting them down because you can't really argue because you don't really know the point, because all you can do is shout back a quotation from Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
It's things like that, and there are various levels of it that people express, but it's generally an unconnected defense of Ayn Rand, no matter what, detached from any kind of reality or any kind of knowledge, and that comes across as cultish. I think. I think everybody dressing the same, although I don't see that among objectivists. I think everybody chanting the same thing. I think anything that subverts what people consider individualism comes across as cultish. And you should be yourself. You should use your own language. You should try to explain. You should refer to Ayn Rand when relevant, but don't use it as a crutch. Be willing to make mistakes. Be willing to concede that you make mistakes. So those are the kind of things that you need to do in order to just live in a way that does not promote this notion of it being a cult. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we've got 734 area code, 920 at the end of the phone number. Hey.
Hi, Yaron. It's Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
Back in the old days, liberal used to mean for liberty. And
Yep.
How did that get changed?
Oh, wow. I don't know. It happened early in American history, and it didn't happen in Europe. So it only happened in American history. And I think it was, I think the progressives just constantly identified themselves as liberal. And unfortunately, from early on in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the more pro-free market elements called themselves conservative. So that left it open for the left to take over the word liberal. I think that's the sequence of events, but I don't know the history that well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Eric.
Hey, Yaron.
Hey.
I was curious, do you think woke thinking is similar to cult thinking?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is because it's basically everybody follows the same party line. Everybody says the same. Everybody attacks the same people. Everybody uses the same language. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a cult, but certainly cult thinking, collectivist thinking. Yes, I definitely think that's all right. I wouldn't call them a cult because I just don't think it's helpful to call them a cult, and it doesn't quite work like a cult, and I don't know the extent to which it affects their private life. I mean, I'm sure it does, but I don't know. A cult really dominates your entire life. I mean, it's every aspect of your life is dictated by cult ritual and cult dogma. There is no opportunity really for expressing your individuality in anything important in a cult, often including what you wear, right? So, but I do think it's cult-like thinking in a sense that it's dogma derived from wherever, somebody else who's even woker than you, and it results in this mass, everybody piling on with kind of the same language, the same concerns, the same issues. Yeah. All right. Eric, do you have a follow-up? Looks like you're
No, that was it. Thank you.
George.
Good evening, Yaron. It's great to be on. This is my first time.
Oh, good. Thank you.
It was the show. It was your show on the history of money that told me to get off my behind, stop mooching, and pay for the value I'm getting. And the show on risk and Beethoven this week. If I had enough money so that you never had to use the Trump or Biden word again, I would. So please keep it up.
I will. I mean, it's a little demotivating, the fact that those two shows have gotten so few views as compared to the shows I do in politics. But what can I do? I'll still continue doing them because I love doing them.
Excellent. Now, I've heard you say on the shows that there are podcasts and other people's platforms that you wouldn't go on, and that there are people, Noam Chomsky comes to mind, where you would not debate them in any forum.
Yeah.
Then on the other side, there are people, presumably like Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, Weinstein, who implicitly or not have a no objectivist policy. So I'm wondering, where and how does one draw the lines between you and the people and the ideas that you will not and maybe should not engage? And is it any different when you're inviting them into your own house, onto this show, as opposed to going to theirs or a neutral third-party platform?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's not an easy one to answer. So it's one that requires judgment, and there's some principles, but very much on a case-by-case basis. And different intellectuals are gonna come to somewhat different conclusions. It's one of these things where I think we can disagree on. I think the principle is you do not want to sanction evil. You do not want to give the impression that evil is okay somehow, that evil is legitimate, that a certain points of view have currency, are worth debating. And it's particularly tricky when where you don't, so that's one thing you don't want to do. The other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to make people think that this other person's, your view is the same in some significant way than the other person's view, if you think even if you argue against them because of some confusion. And this is the issue of libertarians. It's very tricky to engage with libertarians in debates, discussions, panels, things like that, because it's so easy for people to think you're one of them. And if you want to differentiate yourself from them, then you have to really make an effort when you're on the stage with them to make clear the differences between you, right? Nobody's going to confuse me with a liberal, with a leftist. They might confuse me with some types of conservatives. They might, particularly when the media pushes that Donald Trump is an Ayn Rand character, they might confuse me with Donald Trump. That's why I spent a lot of time separating. They're probably not going to confuse me with a religious conservative. So one is you don't want to sanction evil. Second, you don't want to sanction an idea that you don't agree with. So you have to be cautious to separate yourself, even if you get on stage with some people. So so let's start with evil. Noam Chomsky, people who sanction the worst forms of totalitarianism, I will not get on stage with. I won't get on stage on anybody who's a self-professed Nazi. I won't get on stage with a self-professed white supremacist. I won't get on stage, or who I think is a Nazi or self-professed white supremacist. I won't get on stage with a communist or an apologist for communism, or which is Noam Chomsky, somebody who is who was an apologist for Pol Pot, the Cambodian genocidal maniac. But then the borderline cases, right? There's these cases where I debate socialists, and you could argue the socialists are sanctioning communism, although they pretend not to, and they want democratic socialism, and they all pro-democracy, and they're all pro-free speech and everything. But it's tricky, and it's not, I'm wary of debating socialists. I try to only debate socialists when they're young, not too young, but young, so that they are, you could still say there's some chance that they're mistaken and not pure evil. Like Noam Chomsky is just evil, right? So that's one. I don't debate. So that's one category. The libertarian category primarily relates to anarchists. I typically don't debate anarchists, although again I've done so at least once, because I don't want to give anybody the impression that we agree on stuff, but this politics stuff, we just disagree on that. No, we disagree on everything. We disagree on metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and politics. And and people confuse, they agree on everything. It's just that there's some disagreement about what the actual form of rights protecting government has to be. And one believes there should be no government, and one believes there should. No, the whole philosophical foundation is different. And if I think I can get to that, and if I think I can make that clear, then the debate might be worthwhile. If I can't, then it's not. It's much more dangerous, and it's much more polluting for anarchists, for people to think objectivism is somehow aligned with anarchism. I consider anarchism as a really, really bad set of ideas. I also think it's not really that serious. I think it discredits the liberty movement, and so I'm reluctant to participate in a debate with them. And then, as you said, it makes a difference. I wouldn't invite any of those people on my show. I wouldn't invite a socialist on my show. I prefer, if I'm going to do a debate like that, to do it in neutral ground. And I might, depending on the person, I might go on their show, but I would not do it on my show. And again, all of that is nuanced, and it depends on the person and so on. But the key is not to sanction evil. And then the application, I'll just say, is hard. And we at the Institute, the Ayn Rand Institute, we'd spend a lot of time figuring out, who do we debate? Who are we willing to talk to? What conferences do we go to? What panels do we participate in? What organizations do we work with? What do we don't? It's not easy. It's not easy to make those calls. So that's the thinking. Debbie.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
So, first of all, I'd like to second that notion about enjoying the risk show and the show about money, and these ones where you just take a topic and analyze it. I really enjoy those shows. So
good. I do too. So we're all on the same side.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually encountered this morning something that I consider to be good news about the culture. And so I thought I'd share that and see what you think, if your perspective is similar to mine on that this is good news. And I encountered it, I'll warn you now, I encountered it in an article about the election, but I am not calling to talk about politics. I'm calling to talk about this other thing. So it was in a New York Times article talking about why the Biden campaign should be worried. And some progressives are concerned that Latinos are not going to vote for Biden and that they may not vote at all. And that's in itself is not neither good nor bad, really, I guess. But why I thought it was really great. So they said that these progressive pollsters, they've done 15 focus groups and a national survey. And what the article said is progressives commonly categorize Latinos as people of color. No doubt partly because progressive Latinos see the group that way and encourage others to do so as well. Yet in our survey, only 1 in 4 Hispanics saw themselves as people of color. And instead, they reject this designation. They prefer to see themselves as a group integrating into the American mainstream, one not overly bound by racial constraints, but instead able to get ahead through hard work. And I just thought that was wonderful. Like that this big demographic group is saying, hey, we're not a tribe, we're Americans.
Yep.
Quit treating us like a tribe. And I
Yep.
thought that was wonderful. I was pleasantly surprised by that. So curious what you think.
I agree with you completely. And I think it's true. I've always said this. I find Hispanics I meet, who hardworking, they're ambitious, whether they're legal or illegally here. They want to make a living. They want to take care of their families. They're entrepreneurial. They start businesses. Very few of them just want to be on welfare and not do anything. Particularly first generation. I think where the corruption happens is second and third generation. But there the corruption is not because they're Hispanics or not because they're immigrants, but the corruption happens because of our educational system, our government schools. But I think that's absolutely true. That they because they're entrepreneurs, they tend to be more pro business, and I think that there's a reason they leave their cultures. Partially, they leave their cultures because of opportunities. But think about if there's 5 million people in Guatemala, why do these 100,000 people leave and the rest stay? And it's because the people who leave are more ambitious, more independent, braver, more courageous. And these are exactly the kind of people you want in this country. And when you look at, and if you look at the way they don't vote as a bloc. Jews and blacks are much more likely to vote as blocs than Hispanics. Indeed, Hispanics like Cubans vote Republican. In Texas, Hispanics are much more likely to vote Republican than in California. And why? Because Republicans have treated Hispanics really, really, really badly in California. So my view is, and I've held this for years now, that the reason Hispanics vote for Democrats is not because they like Democrats. It's because Republicans treat them really badly. If you watch the debates and Republican after Republican after Republican describe how horrible, immigrants from Mexico are, then guess what? The immigrants from Mexico are not going to like you because you've shown immense disrespect towards them. In places like Texas, where Republicans have treated immigrants from Mexico and other Latin American countries with respect, they have gotten their votes. They tend to be, unfortunately, they tend to be religious, but they tend to be conservative in their social views. They tend to be pro small business, at least. They tend to assimilate. Every study I've seen shows that they assimilate just like previous generations of immigrants. There's no difference between Hispanic immigration and the immigration of Irish and Italians and Jews in the late 19th century, early 20th century in terms of their assimilation. And the only reason why in some cases it doesn't happen is because of our educational system, not because of anything to do with their culture. So I find Republican attitude towards Hispanics to be truly horrific and truly awful. And if only they lightened up, I think they would get a lot more of their votes. Whether that's good or bad is a different question, but I think they'd get a lot more of their votes. So I agree with you. I think it's a good sign that maybe even some progressives are realizing that they shouldn't treat everybody as groups, that these people are individuals and they want to assimilate, they want to become Americans.
Yeah, and the fact that they're not interested in voting for Trump, they're just saying, well, we're probably just not going to vote. I mean, that's actually also encouraging.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of not voting, but yes, it's. But the other aspect of that is, if you look at the numbers, Hispanics tend to not vote very much, even in past elections. So turnout among Hispanic immigrants, even citizens, tends to be low. So even those people who are, who want to stop immigrations because the immigrants vote Democratic, it's just not true because they just don't vote very often. They don't vote much, so they're not a big force, particularly in presidential, maybe in local elections, but not in presidential elections.
Yeah, well, maybe they would vote if there were someone who was a better alternative.
I still think that Americans, wherever they happen to come from, would respond to a better alternative. I still have that hope. I hope I'm right, but yes, maybe if we had, not an objectivist candidate, but just a candidate who understood something about America and something about individualism and something about markets, I think Americans would rally around a candidate like that. Unfortunately, not last election, not this election. I'm hopeful for the future, but partially depends on what happens this election. Yeah. All right. So the next question is a political question. Sorry, my super chat. The super chat questionnaires are still immersed in politics. Why are you so confident the path to improving the right is to vote Democratic? I see no evidence of that. I think Andrew Bernstein's argument is more convincing and reality-oriented. I mean, as you know, I strongly disagree with Andy. I think Andy views the world in, I think his argument is far too simplistic. I think it's wrong. I think it amounts to what I've complained about, not just in this election, but in past election, counting the issues and doing little check marks about where you agree and where you disagree with different candidates. I don't think that's the right approach to elections. I think you have to look at a much bigger picture. I think you have to look at the principle behind a candidate. I think you have to think about what is more damaging long-term. But I'm not going to get into that. You want to ask about improving the right. I believe that Donald Trump and Donald Trump's ideas and Donald Trump's quote ideology is about as bad as it can get, short of the authoritarian left. So I think Trump's whole idea of conservative nationalism, of anti-capitalism, anti-immigration, anti-trade, and this is his agenda. You guys can claim otherwise, but objectively, this is his agenda: anti-trade, anti-immigration, anti-free markets, central planning, industrial policy, and a strong and ever-growing executive branch. Weakness in foreign policy, complete capitulation to any authoritarian out there, and the love and the admiration expressed towards authoritarians, but from North Korea to Russia to China. I think Donald Trump is to Saudi Arabia, I should say, Saudi Arabia in particular. Donald Trump is particularly fond of authoritarians and positive towards them. All of that is where Donald Trump is positioning the Republican Party, a complete pragmatism, no regard for free markets or any kind of economic principles. Look at government spending under Trump. It's out of control. It's insane. It's going to bankrupt this country. So basically, if you look at the Democrats are for high spending. The Democrats are anti-American in foreign policy. The Democrats are anti-trade, anti-capitalism, and so on every issue, Donald Trump basically agrees with the Democrats. Just his is a vulgar, authoritarian-laced, super pragmatic version of the Democrats' agenda. Now, the Democrats have other things that they're really bad on. They want to regulate to hell and all this other stuff. But on the important stuff like spending money, they're completely in agreement, right? So take those two. Well, my argument is if those are the two alternatives, which they are right now, then there is no opposition. There's no opposition. Stephanie, I disagree with you. I think Trump is 1,000 times worse than Bush 1,000 times, a million times worse than Reagan, but much worse than Bush. And certainly the only good thing supposedly about Trump is he stands up to the left, but the standing up to the left does not manifest itself in policy. It only manifests itself in him attacking the right of the leftist press to express itself. Either Bush, I hate both Bushes, and yet he's worse than both Bushes. A lot worse than both Bushes. So there's no opposition. You basically got two political parties committed to the same outcome. The outcome is statism and authoritarianism. The left is committed to statism and authoritarianism, and the Trumpists are committed to statism and authoritarianism, right? So now the question is, how do we get the Republican Party, who used to be a decent opposition party, never was a good governing party, but used to be a decent opposition party? Think of the fact that for 6 years, Bill Clinton almost got nothing done because Republicans stopped him because they dominated the House of Representatives. Think of the fact that Obama for 6 years got almost nothing done because the Republicans were a good opposition party and they stopped him for 6 years post-Obamacare. Obama did nothing. There was an opposition party. Trump's party is not an opposition party. Trump's party is a reaction to the left, and the way they've reacted to the left is by adopting on economic issues, on foreign policy issues, the left's agenda. The left's agenda. And we need the Republicans to be an opposition party. And really, you need Stefan suggests listening to Leonard Peikoff's America versus Americans. So we need an opposition party. Now, I'm not saying I'm confident that if Trump loses, Republicans will become a better opposition party. I'm saying it's the only chance. If Trump wins, Trump will dominate the Republican Party for 50 years. His views, his ideas, and worse, will dominate the Republican Party for 50 years. There are already think tanks, magazines, conferences, organizations, movements, youth movements, I include Turning Point here, dedicated to the agenda of Donald Trump, dedicated to being anti-trade, anti-immigration, a proper foreign policy, anti-capitalism, anti-freedom, pro-government spending up the kazoo. There are whole organizations dedicated to this. Right? There's a whole intellectual legacy now ready to step in to do the work that Trump wants them to do. If he wins, they will dominate the Republican Party. Any voice that is pro-capitalist, pro-freedom, pro-immigration, pro-trade will be shunted and will be relegated to nowhere. And people like Nikki Haley will disappear from the Republican Party. And Nikki Haley is not my ideal. I mention her a lot because she's the one person who has a realistic chance one day and maybe running for president on the Republican side that I might like. We'll see. But those people are gone. And what you get are the national conservatives. What you get is industrial policy. What you get is statism in the name of nationalism. The only chance that the Nikki Haley wing of the Republican Party and people like her have a chance of dominating the Republican Party is if there's a fight for the future of the Republican Party. A fight I'm not sure they will win. A fight that Donald Trump might win even if he loses. But the only chance of them winning that fight is for him to lose. That's my argument. You can buy it. You cannot buy it. I don't really care, right? You guys have to decide how you're going to vote. I don't think it matters. I don't think I matter. I don't think you guys matter that much to what the election is going to generate. The election will be the election will be. But I also have an evaluation of Biden that is not yours. If you think that a Biden administration is immediately the institution of the most far left policies possible, then I think you're delusional and you're deluding yourself and you're deluding the people you're talking to. American system of government doesn't work that fast. Think about how difficult it was for Obama to get Obamacare passed on Obamacare is a lot lighter than what many of you are claiming a Biden administration would get passed. Biden hates the Antifa part of his party. So does Harris. I'm trying to avoid saying her first name because I can't pronounce it. They hate Biden and her. It's going to take, I don't think the world is going to be good if Biden gets elected. I think it's going to be horrible. I just think there's a future if Biden gets elected. And if Trump gets elected, I don't think there's a future. That's why I think it's important. But, what are they going to do? The Green New Deal will take years to vote on, to get approved. Biden doesn't really believe in the Green New Deal. It'll be a compromised Green New Deal. It would be a moderate Green New Deal. And then it'll lack any kind of real stuff. It will be weak and pathetic, just like the Paris Agreement. The Paris Accord is weak and pathetic. No European country has actually met the standards of the Paris Accord because there's no enforcement mechanism. None of this stuff is going to happen like that. That's not the American system of government. It's not the American system of government. Now you're going to find out anyway, because I think it's likely Biden wins, and you'll find out what happens. It's going to be bad. I'm saying now it's going to be bad. It's going to be horrible. We're going to have to fight tooth and nail everything that he does. But it won't end the world. And if Republicans hold on to the Senate, it actually might turn out pretty good. I believe divided government is the best government. So if the Republicans win the Senate and Biden wins the presidency, I think it'll be better than Trump and better than a Republican. And if they win the Senate, if Democrats win the Senate, it'll be really bad. And then I hope Republicans win the House or the Senate or both 2 years from now. But Trump himself is not a solution to anything. It's the fast road towards, and look how the country has deteriorated in the last 4 years. And I think Trump has done that. He makes the left worse and he makes the right worse. That's what and by the way, that's exactly what I predicted 4 years ago. I said, what he will do is radicalize the left and radicalize the right. And that's exactly what's happened. But some of you are confident Trump won't lose. And it might be that Trump won't lose because he won't let himself lose. He just won't leave the White House. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? But anyway, let's go back to our people who join me live. All right, the order has changed because the way you appear on my screen has changed. So we're going to start with Eric.
Hey, thanks. Are you aware of Dr. Jason Hill? He's a philosophy professor at DePaul University.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been on my show.
Oh, okay, cool. Have you read his book, We Have Overcome?
I have not, but I know the story. I know what he's talking about. And he was on the show to discuss these ideas. So just look Yaron Brook, Jason Hill. You'll find the Yaron Brook show where I interview him.
Okay.
I've known Jason for a long time, way before all this was going on.
Okay.
He wrote an essay for Salon, I think, where he talked about life in Jamaica and how he discovered Ayn Rand. And I think it's the title of the essay was How Ayn Rand Saved My Life.
Right. I did read that. That was awesome.
Yep.
I was just curious. You haven't read his book, but part of the book he described or writes about immigrants assimilating to U.S. culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious of what your thoughts are on that. If you don't know his, just what are your personal thoughts on how that's done?
What do you mean how that's done? How it happens?
How immigrants, I guess, historically have assimilated to U.S. culture, and if they still do that today. Yeah.
I mean, I think that they still do. I think all the evidence I've seen, the empirical evidence suggests that they do. And again, there's some issue with these days with particularly second generation Hispanics because of what they're being taught in the schools, and it depends on the states. But the more we emphasize, the more the left brings up racial politics, the more they do identity politics, the less assimilation happens. But mostly how people assimilate into American culture is through two institutions. And I think the most important of those institutions is work. I think they go to work and they get a job and they interact with Americans and they get a sense of the importance Americans place on work. And if you have a job in an American business, you expect it to perform, you expect it to show up on time, you expect it to behave in particular ways. You expect it to they see other Americans being ambitious, and I think they're already ambitious because they came to America, but they adopt kind of the American style. If they come from cultures where people tend to lie, steal, and cheat, there are certainly cultures like that I could name. They realize very quickly if they work in an American business or if they're entrepreneurs in America, that policy doesn't work in America, that they will get penalized for it, that they will not be successful if they adopt that. And they slowly adopt American values, I think, through having to go to work, having to engage. I think generally Americans become better. And the reason America is better than Europe is because of what happens when Americans go to work. In Europe, the best job you can get out of college is to go work for the government. It's still true that Americans want to work in the private sector. Once they enter private sector, the whole idea of a profit motive, the whole idea of customer satisfaction, the whole idea of how you relate to your coworkers and how you relate to your boss inculcates a certain spirit of Americanism in the kids, even ones that are being indoctrinated in Marxism in their college education. So I think that's one way in which they assimilate. I think the second one is, it's through education. It's through participating in the education institutions. And this is where it's very dangerous, because this is where the really, really bad ideas, when they are really, really bad ideas, when they're focused on separating them, when they focused on this idea of white privilege and all of that, that's when the assimilation can break down. But if the kids are just brought into the school and they're expected to speak English and they're just learning American history, and even if it's not great American history, as long as it's not horrible, the worst kind, the identity politics type, then I think the kids ultimately get assimilated. They have friends that are from different cultures, and they ultimately assimilate. And parents who, I've always used this idea of the pregnant woman who crosses the border to have the baby in the United States. They call them anchor babies, right? And how, people, so many people hate these mothers. And I think they're heroes. Why are they doing this? They're doing this so their kids will have a better life. So they come here and they try to encourage the kid to have a better life. The parent they emphasize education. They try to get them to college. They try to get them on the American way and try to better their lives and to work hard and do all the things that are American. And the motivation there is to assimilate. So I think those are the mechanisms. I'm sure Jason has other insights into it, but that would be my sense. And I see no reason why. The only reason I see it bogging down is leftist identity politics.
Perfect. Yeah, that actually clarifies a lot. And I think it's pretty much in line with what he thinks.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised. I mean, we disagree on certain things in politics, Jason Hill and I. I mean, I think we're friendly and we get along well, but I think we do disagree. I think he's more sympathetic to, let's say, Republicans than I am. But I think we both are immigrants. That's a plus. And I think we both understand, we're both individualists, which is the key.
Right. Yeah. And he said that Americans are the first individualists and by design, the first non-tribal people in the world, which I really liked.
I think that's absolutely right. And really, Ayn Rand said that decades ago, but yes, that's basically absolutely right. I mean, it's the first country established on the principle of individualism.
And it seems like we're moving in the opposite direction right now.
Yeah, we're heading very quickly in the opposite direction, which is what's so tragic.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Sure. George.
Towards the end of Atlas Shrugged, in his last interaction with his family, Reardon says to his mother, "I would have forgiven the past if today you had urged me to quit and disappear." What does forgiveness mean in the objectivist ethics, and what does it entail for both parties? Because kind of similar to the earlier question about the stereotype of a cult, there's also the stereotype that objectivists are wholly, uncaring, unforgiving, every sin is a capital punishment. But really, where does that concept of forgiveness come into interpersonal ethics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for sending it in advance, because I gave it a little bit of thought, but probably not as much as I should. So forgiveness basically means, I mean, it depends on the context. There's not one form of forgiveness. So I think with Reardon saying that to his mother, forgiveness in that context would mean, I won't think ill of you. I'll drop it. But I think ill of you. And I'm in a sense, I'm holding that to thinking ill of you. So forgiveness in that context, but forgiveness, because I don't think Reardon can have a relationship with his mother moving forward, no matter what. I think she would have to do a lot more than encourage him to leave. But I don't think he could have an active relationship with her. But I think he could not be hostile to her. But you can imagine forgiveness being a second chance, giving somebody another chance at a relationship with you, or an opportunity to trade with you or to engage with you in some kind of activity, right? And so that's what I think it entails. And then, so the question is, when are you willing to have a relationship with somebody who has done bad to you? Well, first, it depends on how bad his action towards you was, right? They killed your wife. I mean, they murdered your wife. Well, never. There is no forgiveness. There's no such thing as forgiveness, right? There's no category by which an evil like that could be forgiven, right? There's no meaning to it. What does it mean? So I find it horrific when I don't know, some murderer who's murdered children and then the parents are forgiving him. I mean, that's nuts. There's no second chance. There's no, I'm not thinking ill of you. I'm going to hate your guts for the rest of my life forever and hope that you rot in whatever hell of existence you're going to have on earth. So that would be my attitude to anybody who did that kind of harm to me. But then the more moderate form of harm, luckily, right? If somebody lies to me, then first they would have to admit that they lied. They would have to ask for forgiveness and express explicitly that it won't happen again. And then I'd stop. I'd be willing to not think ill of them, and maybe even have any relationship with them if it was believable to me that they would not do it again, right? So I would be willing to give some people a second chance. Right? Somebody's done something that you believe is immoral, and look, in objectivism, immorality, there's tons of immorality out there. So saying something is immoral, I mean, a lot is immoral, because immorality in objectivism means you evaded. And I think a lot of people evade a lot of the time. I don't think it's unusual for people to do something immoral. Somebody's done something immoral. It's the same thing. They have to recognize, they have to apologize. If it's cost you something, they might have to compensate you. And then again, you can resume some form of relationship. You always want to keep an eye on them, because if they've sinned once, they might sin again, but you can resume. So those are the contexts, I think, in which forgiveness is possible. But it definitely requires recognition that the person did something wrong, and a willingness to ask for forgiveness, or to even compensate you for the damages they have caused you. That makes sense?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Andrew, I know you have a phone number now. Andrew?
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I noticed that Ayn Rand, somebody once asked Ayn Rand if the fact that she didn't believe in God made her feel lonely.
Yep.
And she said, no. She laughed at even the notion that it would make her feel lonely. And she said, no, it gives me the feeling of responsibility.
Yep.
And mentioned the word responsibility in certain contexts, and I just noticed like she had a very positive association with that word.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a prideful kind of association. And it contrast it with, I think, the way a lot of people, you know, associate responsibility with just this kind of duty bound, very, you know, kind of cold notion that would be associated with it. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, how do you think the philosophy kind of infuses that concept of responsibility with a positive association?
Oh, I mean, I think it's all over the philosophy and it's all over the ethics. You know, you are responsible for living a good life. There's nobody else who can live your life for you. It's your life. It's your mind. It's your work. It's all your responsibility. You know, think of the values, the cardinal values: reason, purpose, self-esteem. Your reason, your purpose, your values, your self-esteem. And all of that is about how do you gain all those? Well, you have to take your life, your reason, your purpose, your self-esteem seriously. And that's what responsibility means. It means taking your life seriously at the deepest moral, ethical level, right? That's what it means. It's not the kind of personal responsibility the conservatives have, whereas, you know, pay your bills on time and show up and stuff. That's all true, but it's deeper than that. It's take your mind seriously, think. And that's what she says about the issue of God, right? I can't default to somebody else. There is no default. That would be ridiculous. That would be, you know, that would be sad if I did that. You know, Jesus take the wheel. You ever hear that song? Unbelievable, right? Jesus take the wheel. Think about what you'd be saying about you, about your mind, about your self-esteem, about your values, if you believed that. And so to her, the responsibility is a challenge. It's the embodiment of life. It's to live. It's everything. So, yeah, I mean, she would say it. Yeah. So I think the idea of responsibility is implicit in everything in the ethics.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain tie to it that's so natural, like, since the ethics are about the preservation of your life.
Yeah, it's your life. You're responsible.
Once you decide to live,
yep,
the responsibility gets infused into survival and your whole life force, you know, in that positive way.
Absolutely. Great.
Right, thanks.
Daniel.
I also really enjoyed the show on canceling Beethoven, leftists that want to cancel Beethoven. I didn't hear you say it, but I have often heard that position given as, well, we're trying to save classical music. It's not very popular. It's very stuffy. If we separate it from this thing that is keeping people away, we'll save it. We're the good guys in this battle here. And yeah, if Beethoven represents reverence for genius, well, we're going to separate that from classical music from now on.
Yeah, and it's dishonest because look, there are plenty of concerts at the park, and classical pops, and I mean, which are wonderful and a lot of fun. And I love going to the park and listening to music and people are talking because, you know, there's just an atmosphere there, and there's a time and a place for that, right? There's opera at the park. The Met has done for years operas in Central Park, and so there've been real attempts to bring classical music to the masses, and I think to some extent successful. I think a lot of those people in the park then go to the concert hall and then experience what it's like to take it seriously, and that's the thing they think they want to get rid of. They want to get rid of that profound, deep, amazing experience of when you take it seriously, when you actually are there to listen, when you're focused, when you're quiet, when your whole attention is given to the music. That's what they really resent. It's that and maybe some of them don't know how to do it, so they resent people who can or do. But I think it's more than that. I think they don't want to experience it. I mean, it's pretty intimate when you really connect with the music, and it's really, the emotions are swirling inside. It's a powerful thing, and they want grayness. I mean, what is a rock concert? With all due respect to all the lovers of rock out there, I mean, what is it? There's a certain mindlessness to it. There's a certain, you're yelling, you're screaming, you're barely listening to the music. There's a beat, so you're constantly to the beat, right? I mean, if you purify it, what you get is a rave, right? Rave is they take everything out, just the beat, right? And that's what you have. And there's a certain mind numbingness. I mean, Jennifer's objecting, I know, but there's a certain mind numbingness to it. Now, I know it's not necessarily true, but it can be true. Remember what these people want, right? And I think that's what they want. I don't know. I mean, and look, I'm not saying that everybody who goes to listen to classical music does it right. I mean, I often go and listen to a concert, and I look around the auditorium, and people are there to see who else came. People are there to see what clothes people are wearing. People are there to be seen. And it makes me sad, right? So I'm there, and this is the thing, I'm there, and I'm in the music, right? I'm conducting gently because I don't want to disturb people, but I'm tapping my foot, I'm doing stuff because I can't stop myself. And I see people just stone-faced, just looking, and I wonder, are they experiencing anything? Do they know what's going on here? So I'm not saying that the traditional concert, everybody who goes there, just like I'm not saying that everybody who goes to a rock concert is the same thing, but I am, there's something about the reliance of modern music on a beat, and I've said this before, that says something about what they're connecting to in the human soul. It's the most simplest thing you can imagine. Now, again, I'm excluding Rush concerts, Jennifer. Rush concerts don't count.
And I have to say, I've been to a lot of classical music concerts. I've only been to one rock concert. It was 1981, Pat Benatar. With her opera-trained voice, she got on the stage, and for 3 solid hours, she hardly took a breath between songs, and she carried the night. That was an incredible experience.
I saw a group called Renaissance, which is not very well known in the U.S., but the lead singer in Renaissance, the female vocalist, had an operatic, magnificent voice, and they were the old what did they call it? Progressive rock, where it was long 6, 8, 9 minute songs, and it was breathtaking. I mean, she was amazing. And then the other stuff I saw in terms of popular music is, I saw, Simon and Garfunkel. I saw them when they came together. They visited Israel. I've seen Paul Simon in concert. I saw Don McLean. But those aren't rock concerts in the same sense. But yeah, I mean, I like rock music. I like popular music. It has a different depth to it. It just does. I never saw the Beach Boys. That would have been fun, and I would have loved to go. I would like to go see Pink Floyd once, but of course they're gone. But somebody recommended a Pink Floyd imitation band that's really, really good and actually being endorsed by some of the Pink Floyd people. Mm-hmm. I'd enjoy that, but at the same time, I recognize the difference, and you've got to recognize that the different things are appropriate for different things. And I'm going to recommend again Toscanini because I'm still reading the book. It's going to take me months to finish this book. It's massive. But, his commitment to the music and his understanding of the music is just, and what he saw in it was just stunning and amazing. And his integrity is what really gets me every time I hear another story about him, the integrity that the man had, except in his marital vows. I mean, he had integrity in everything else except that, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Roy.
I'm actually going to pick up on the canceling Beethoven, because I was going to talk about that also. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though those two guys in addition to having twisted values, seem like really insufferable jerks.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, right. But so when you're extolling the glories of opera, which I agree with you on, and you then in response to someone's question, we're talking about other types of music, you left out one that I think, I wouldn't say rivals opera, but has some of the same qualities, because opera, I always considered musical theater. So for me, the story is important, the acting is important, the lyrics are important. And you didn't mention the Broadway musical, the West End musical, because some of them have been stupendous on all fronts, and and certainly for the good ones, the lyrics are a hell of a lot better than a lot of opera lyrics.
Yep.
And the music can be glorious, and then you have people like Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, Harold Arlen, Johnny Mercer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
What's unfortunately called the Great American Songbook, which is a tacky name, and it leaves out Noel Coward, who's one of the greatest of the greats. So I'm just wondering whether that was just an oopsie, I meant to mention it, or you don't like it.
It's not that I don't like it. I don't hold it in the same category as opera, and not because the stories are not better, because often they are. Not because the lyrics are not better, because often they are. It's at the end of the day, it's the music. Why I think the music in musical theater can often be amazing and wonderful. I just don't think it has the same depth and breadth of emotion. I just can't compare, I don't know, an aria out of Tosca or La Traviata with anything in the songbook. They're all, not to say that the songbook is not great, but there's just a different level of intensity in terms of the for me, right, in terms of the emotional response to it. I think it's the best of what I would call the popular music world. It's far better than anything in popular music that we have today or that we had at the time. I mean, you really, Cole Porter is above, anybody who's writing today in terms of the quality of the music, the lyrics, the whole package. And you also had voices, right? I mean, there was a big emphasis in those days on voice. And today, I guess any gruff voice counts, right? So I just think it's not quite at the same level.
Well, I just submit that the score to the musical Candide is at that level. There are some songs in West Side Story. The duet, A Boy Like That, is as good as any dramatic duo. And several things in West Side Story, and Rodgers and Hammerstein, especially, some of those are, I think, do reach that level.
Yeah, and Ayn Rand, what Ayn Rand loved was another area that I didn't really cover, which is not opera, not quite Broadway kind of musical theater, but the operetta, which is a whole other genre, if you will, and Ayn Rand loved it, and Lena Peikoff loves operettas, and we actually years and years ago, we did a tour of Austria where we went to these little villages that were doing operetta festivals, and we got to see operettas. And I love operettas, and they're great, and they really, really are wonderful, and they have a sense of life that no opera has, the stories are not always better than the opera stories, which are pretty lame, but quite amazing. But look, music is the one area where there really is no point in too much debate, because I at least don't have the vocabulary to try to prove that my point is right and you're wrong. I think what here I would encourage people to do is listen to opera, listen to operetta, listen to musical theater, get engaged with those forms, because we're so immersed in popular music. We so think that the music we listened to when we were teenagers, that's the only thing that matters, right? And it's so easy to fall into that trap and to think, that's it. That I think too many people out there are poor, spiritually poor, because they're not exposed to these great forms of music from the past. So I'd encourage everybody to go out and explore all these forms of music.
Do you have time for a Toscanini story, an anecdote for me?
Sure.
Okay, now this is when I was a kid. A friend of mine who introduced me to opera, who knew a hell of a lot, and I can't swear that this isn't apocryphal, but Puccini died before he finished writing Turandot.
Yes.
Toscanini was conducting Turandot, and when he got to a certain point in Act 3, he laid down the baton and said, "At this point, the maestro died," and walked off the stage.
Yeah, that was the world premiere of Turandot. And the interesting thing is that Toscanini was instrumental in finishing Turandot. So the finish we have today, Toscanini had a big hand in it. Indeed, Toscanini did quite a bit of editing on at least one of the Puccini opera. But that's exactly the kind of conductor he was. He was, the best tribute he could have to Puccini was not to play the stuff that Puccini didn't exactly write. Right. Yeah. And that was the world premiere. Later, he conducted the whole thing. But the first time he conducted it, he just put the baton down and walked away. But I will have a lot of Toscanini stories because I'm in the part of the book. We're still pre-World War I. But when we get to World War II, when we get to his interaction with the Nazis and his interaction with Mussolini and his concerts in Palestine and what he tells Richard Strauss and his attitude towards Richard Strauss, who cooperated with the Nazis, his attitude towards Furtwängler, who stayed and conducted under the Nazis. That's when it becomes, I think, interesting. And I'll have a lot of anecdotes about those kind of things. But yes, that is a true story about Toscanini.
I look forward to your stories.
Do you like, Jennifer asked if I like The Sound of Music. Yeah, I mean, The Sound of Music's amazing. I love The Sound of Music. It's what a movie. What a great soundtrack. What a benevolent universe. In the throes of Nazism, and it's a story about escaping the Nazis, and it's just wonderful. And it's based on a true story, and everything about it is just wonderful. I mean, the acting. I grew up on Sound of Music. Julie Andrews was the movies I used to go when I was a child. You had to go to the theater. We had no TV and stuff. That's what I used to go and watch. I grew up with Julie Andrews. So, I love Mary Poppins. I love a lot of the Julie Andrews movies. But Sound of Music is the best, is one of the really great. Christopher Plummer is fantastic. Yeah, you would like Christopher Plummer. All right. A few $20 Super Chat questions. Do you have a favorite musical? My girlfriend has been showing me older musicals I've never seen before. I have to admit, I enjoyed most of them. I like The King and I. Yeah, I like The King and I. I'll have to think about that if I have a favorite musical. I'm not sure, but Candide, that was just mentioned, is amazing and beautiful. But there are a lot of really, really exceptional musical. Do you have a favorite music score composer? I mean, I love John Williams, James Horner. I love the spaghetti movie guy, the guy who did all the Westerns, Mazziotti. There was a guy who did spaghetti movies, but then there was the guy who did the score for, maybe somebody knows what his name is. The guy who did the score for High Noon, who did a lot. Sergio Leone was a director, not the writer of music. Yeah, I mean, I think the best serious music in the late 20th century and maybe even early 21st century was written for movies. I think some of the movie scores are fantastic. They're wonderful. Yes, it was Ennio Morricone, something like that. It's on the chat. Yes, Morricone. But the guy who wrote the music for High Noon, who I don't have with me right now, is fantastic. But yes, probably my favorite, the guy who wrote the High Noon was Dmitri Chomkin. Dmitri Chomkin is amazing. Korngold, who was a classical music composer, very good American classical music composer, in the early days of movies, wrote a lot of movie scores. So I think there was some terrific music scores, and I'm sure people are listing in the chat a lot of suggestions for other ones. Whoops, I missed the $20 one. Here it is. Do you think emotional repression, which seems prevalent today, is a barrier from people enjoying classical music? Yes. And I think a musical, emotional repression has always been a problem in the US. I think it's funny because the more we teach kids to be connected to their emotion, the more emotional oppression there is when they're adults. But yeah, I think people are afraid of their emotions. People don't understand their emotions. People want simplicity, want simple emotions. They want immediacy. They want short-term gratification. And, classical music requires focus. It requires extensive attention span, and it requires real openness to your own emotional state. And over time, not just a 3-minute song, but you've got to be focused for 20 minutes, half an hour to an hour and a half. If you're in a Wagner opera, you might have to be focused for 3 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. Some Wagner operas go over 4 hours. So you have to be focused on all of that. So it's definitely, there's no question that the issue of repression is a big part of that. When you read Atlas Shrugged, do you imagine a certain classical song to use Haley's Fifth Concerto? I mean, yes, I think it's what Ayn Rand imagined. It would be Rachmaninoff's Fifth Piano Concerto. And of course, he never wrote a fifth. So you have to imagine a second and third and better, right? So it's Rachmaninoff. When I think of Haley, I think of Rachmaninoff. The way she describes Haley, it sounds like Rachmaninoff, and specifically his second and third. His fourth is a lot weaker, but his second and third are just, everything she describes Haley's as being maybe missing a little bit. They could be even greater. And that's what Haley does, but it's Rachmaninoff. And she loved, I think the second is mentioned in one of the novels. And I know, I'm pretty sure she loved the second and third piano concertos she mentions in one of the books, maybe in the Romantic Manifesto, the opening of Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. It's that kind of music that comes to my mind. It's Rachmaninoff, it's Tchaikovsky's violin and piano concerto, particularly certain moments in it. That's what it reminds me of. All right, I'm going to take a few super chat questions here because there are quite a few of them. Do you think the saying people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses is true? No, I think lots of people quit jobs. Lots of people find, many people quit because of the bosses, but some people quit because the job is no good. I don't like sayings like that because it's as if it has to be one or the other. It's often both. It's often one. It's often the other. I think there are lots of options in terms of why people quit. It's not like you could say somebody who discovers they don't really want to be a programmer and force them to be, and inspire them to be a programmer because you're a better boss. No, programming's not good for them. They'll quit because they don't like programming anymore. Did you get anything out of being in the IDF, or was it just boredom and slavery? It was mainly boredom. It was interesting at times, usually when there was a war going on. So it was interesting when it was ugly, right? When it was bad, it was also interesting. Did I get anything out of it? Yeah, I got a lot out of it, but was it worth 3 years of my life? Probably not. Now, I should put a caveat on that. The main thing I got out of being in the IDF was a wife, because I met my wife in the Army. And was that worth 3 years? Yes, given that we've been together 37 years and good 37 really, really good years, then it was definitely worth the 3 years. But I got a lot out of it personally. Beyond that, I certainly enhanced my self-esteem. I was competent in the Army. I was good at what I did. I got some adventure. I've got some great stories. If you want to hear Army stories, I've got some good Army stories. It was an experience, and it was in moments, it was a thrilling, interesting kind of experience you wouldn't have in any other form. So I got stuff out of it. Again, other than my wife, I don't think any of these experiences were worth 3 years, and I could have found different experiences in a different realm if I'd spent the 3 years doing something different. If Biden wins in a landslide, we get hyperinflation and economic collapse. Will people blame socialism? I think it's more likely people blame socialism than if Trump wins and we get hyperinflation and economic collapse. And then who are they going to blame? I mean, Trump right now is encouraging the Republicans to spend more on the stimulus package. He's telling the Republicans, cut a deal with the Democrats and spend more. Don't let money stop you. Cut a deal. So Trump is, and that's before he wants a $1 trillion plus infrastructure project, right? So I don't know that Biden will spend more than Trump. And if Biden wins and the Republicans hold the Senate, then I think government spending will come down. That goes back to the Republicans being a decent opposition party. So again, my ideal will be that. And if Trump gives us hyperinflation and economic collapse, then you know it'll be blamed on capitalism. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gave us that. Instead of the Books to Teachers program, why doesn't AOI start a $1 million essay contest? Because I think I don't think you would get because I still think we'd get more essays, but I don't think we'd get so many more essays because I think most kids would say there's no way I'm winning that, right? Everybody else will apply and they're much better writers. I would rather get numbers. I would rather get hundreds of thousands of kids reading Ayn Rand than limiting it to only those kids who can think they can win an essay, which is a much smaller subset. But, it's not crazy to do something like that. And it's certainly crossed our mind. And I'd love to get to the day where we do both. What percentage of Trump supporters would vote a Trump presidency beyond his second term? Is this evidence that we're moving towards dictatorship? I think many. I think there's a real risk that Donald Trump Jr. runs next after Donald Trump if Trump wins, and I think voters would go along with that. I think that Donald Trump satisfies for some voters their interest in seeing us move towards greater and greater authoritarianism. Not everybody who votes for Trump is an authoritarian, but some people, and maybe many people who vote for Trump, are attracted to his authoritarian characteristics. Will you make any moves to promote healing within objectivism after your followers routinely call Trump supporters mercantilist, anti-immigrants, etc.? What the pro-Trump people call me and call us when in terms of the object the leftists or whatever it is and all the name calling that goes in the other direction. No, I mean, I'm going to promote objectivism, and people will either rally around objectivism or they won't. And I've said from the beginning, I don't think politics is that important. I don't think you should obsess about politics. I don't think you should get that excited about politics. But if you're going to be mindless, I'm going to call you mindless. But beyond that, we're going to, I have no problem in people voting for Trump, right? What I have a problem with is mindless Trump supporters. Do you think we're going to change the culture in 50 to 100 years? How will objectivism survive when free speech is banned? It'll survive in the underground. Good ideas have always survived. Yes, I do think we will change the culture in 50 to 100 years. Would you consider live streaming the debate? Yes, I'm thinking about it. The challenge is, when do I talk, right? How do I comment on what they're saying? I can't stop the live stream of the debate. So I'll have to figure out the mechanism by which to do it. I might try it, see if it succeeds. Maybe it'll be a failure. I'll have to talk over them. Maybe it'll just be fun to do. I don't know. Maybe we'll just make fun of them. I'll try to do it. We'll see. Aside from his anarchist leaning, what do you think about Hoppe's work? His property is peace sounds very in line with objectivism. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these libertarians have stolen stuff from objectivism. But Hoppe is a monarchist. He has a false interpretation of history. He has a false view of the Middle Ages. He has a false view of the city-state. He is an anarchist. I see almost no value in Hoppe, other than the few things that you can get from objectivism anyway. So why bother with Hoppe? That's my view. I think he's worse than Rothbard, who I don't. Rothbard was at least a good economist. You could learn some stuff from Rothbard that you couldn't learn elsewhere. I don't think you can learn anything from Harper that you can't learn that you can't learn elsewhere. His history and his discussion of history and forms of government is really, 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 really bad and destructive. All right, let's do one quick round. So you have to have quick questions, guys. Quick, short questions with a live audience, and we'll call it a night. Of course, if any of you want to do some rich super chat or just support the show through super chat, that would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. We're way behind on the super chat relative to previous shows. So if there are any whales out there who want to contribute a big amount, to use Derek's old terminology, go ahead. Don't forget to like the episode if you liked it. And don't forget to share it if you liked it and would like other people to watch it as well. So press the like button. It's easy, it's simple, and it helps a lot. And if you want to support the show, Super Chat is one way. Of course, you can do it on yaronbrookshow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals, all ways in which you support the show. All right, Eric, go for it. And then I'm going to go watch the Celtics.
All right, I'll make it quick. It's more of like a recommendation for everyone. I recently came across Ayn Rand's To All Innocent Fifth Columnists. And I don't know, I assume you've probably read it, but I encourage everyone to read it. It's pretty much like a rallying cry for everyone.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I'll second that. Where is it published, Eric?
I actually came across it online. Someone shared a link with me, but it's actually in the Ayn Rand Journal book. Ayn Rand Journals, I believe it's called.
Okay, great. Good.
But I can post the link for everyone on the chat here.
Oh, great. Great. Thanks. All right, George.
I'll pass. I interrupted an episode of Mr. Sunshine to join you here, so we need to get back to that tonight.
I'm with you on that. You got your priorities right. Andrew.
Hi, Yaron.
Yeah. Hi.
In the spirit of the Celtics game, why do you think athletes are allowed to show happiness and pride without any social retribution?
I mean, it's a good question. I think it's because what they do, people understand why it's spectacular, why it's extraordinary. Whereas a CEO, even a scientist, people don't have that experience. They don't know what it is. We've all played basketball. We know that what LeBron James does is exceptional. And so I think we can appreciate that and sympathize with it. But there is a yearning in all of us for the heroic, for the, so even in people who explicitly reject it, they still enjoy seeing it and want to see it. It's, I guess, part of being human, part of being a human being. And so they, I don't know what they tolerate it in athletes where they wouldn't tolerate it in things of the mind. Another way to look at it is they're all Marxists, right? So if it was a mind game, like, we wouldn't tolerate. But since it's labor, since it's physical, then it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a deeper point there, but I'll have to come back to you with something deeper than that. Although
that's good. Thank you. Appreciate
the Marxist stuff is pretty deep.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for letting me participate.
Sure. Daniel.
On a future show, I wonder if you would cover where the U.S. and China are going. At the end of August, we flew a U-2 in international airspace. The Chinese said, it was over a military exercise they were doing. Chinese said it was provocative, and a few days later, they fired 4 ballistic missiles into the South China Sea, not at anything. I think they're terrified of a head-to-head war with us, but where are we headed?
My quick answer is going to be, it depends on what they do with Taiwan. I think if they are willing to step away from Taiwan for now, I think we're not really heading to war. We're fine. If they choose to engage, take over Taiwan, which I think they could pretty quickly, then all bets are off. I don't think the U.S. or China wants war.
I agree. Anyway, I hope it makes it up to a show level at some time, because I think you can go into it further.
Yep, sounds good. Roy.
Yeah, thank you for recommending the Bureau. I went through all 5 seasons. I wouldn't say in one day, but it's the video equivalent of a page turner.
Yep, it is.
It's so I have to return the favor. Also on HBO Max, the film Jojo Rabbit. Have you seen it, Yaron?
I haven't yet. No, it's on my list.
I saw it at 5 o'clock this morning.
Okay.
It's really something.
Good.
The whimsy and satire have a real solid underpinning of real values and appreciation for humanity, and that is very strong.
That's
Very
great.
strong.
I'll definitely check it out. Check it out. Let me make a recommendation then. Well, and there's one question, and then I'll make a recommendation. You mentioned in the past you're liking the original Star Trek series. Do you like any of the movies? I'm talking about the first 6 from the original cast. I mean, I liked them, but they weren't as deep. They weren't trying to make as interesting as a point, and some of them were just ridiculous. What was the one where they communicate with the whales or something, and they save the whales? I mean, some of them were just absurd. But yeah, I mean, they're fun. I like some of those. But let me make a serious recommendation for one of my favorite TV shows. I just finished the 3 seasons of it. You can find it and on Acorn, which is an app on the app TV, and I'm sure on others. It's called Slings and Arrows. And that's, of course, Slings and Arrows of Outrageous Fortune from Hamlet's famous monologue. And it's a Canadian show about a theater. Every season they are putting on a different Shakespeare play. Season 1 is Hamlet, season 2 is Macbeth, season 3 is King Lear. And what happens in real life with the actors and everything around them mimics what's happening in the play. It's just terrific. It's funny, it's smart, it's well acted. It's the Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, so the Shakespeare stuff is really interesting. It's terrific. I just finished season 3. Highly recommend Slings and Arrows on Acorn TV. You can get it through, I think through Amazon and through Apple TV. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your week. I'll see you probably on Saturday, maybe Friday, but certainly on Saturday, and talk to you then. Bye, everybody. Have a great day, and go Celtics.